My name is Sarah Thompson, and I know firsthand how a few innocent drinks can spiral into a life-altering nightmare that overshadows every waking moment. You might be thinking, it's just a casual beer or glass of wine. But from where I stand now, I see how quickly that so-called harmless indulgence can steal away your sense of self-self. Have you ever wondered how quickly everything you value could change in one single night? Because for me, it happened so fast that by the time I realized I was losing control, it was almost too late. Imagine waking up one day and realizing you've been living someone else's reality, all because of a few drinks that once felt so comforting. That was my life, a slow drift away from who I wanted to be, masked in the belief that alcohol was the glue holding me together. On a fateful night, in the haze of my long-standing struggle with drinking, I found myself teetering on the brink of total collapse. I had no idea that the moment my heart nearly gave out would become the very spark that reshaped the way I saw myself, my relationships, and even what lies beyond. I grew up thinking of alcohol as part of life's normal backdrop. It was there at celebrations and gatherings, and I never questioned its presence. For years, I told myself I drank to relieve stress or cope with long workdays. I'd reach for a bottle when life got too tense, convincing myself that I deserved a break, that I needed to unwind. But I never considered the irony. The more I tried to escape stress, the deeper I sank into isolation. Friends who used to laugh with me gradually became distant, as if sensing a darkness they couldn't quite name. I remember looking into their eyes, seeing their concern, but I brushed it all off with a nervous giggle or a dismissive comment. Part of me knew I was circling a drain, but denial can be incredibly powerful. What I was completely unprepared for was the confrontation with my own mortality. Nobody teaches you how to handle that moment when your body suddenly decides it's had enough and begins to shut down. I'd spent so long hiding behind a haze of liquor, ignoring warning signs that my health was deteriorating. The tension in my chest, the constant fatigue, those were just passing inconveniences. Nothing serious, I told myself, but there's a thin line between coping and destroying yourself, and I was about to cross it. One particular night stands out in my memory. It was a casual get-together, the kind I used to look forward to because it meant I could cut loose without feeling judged. Laughter echoed through the room, and the music was a thumping background to the hum of conversation. At first, I felt normal. Just another evening of mild escapism, a few jokes with friends, a few more drinks than I probably should have had. But something was off inside me. It was like a quiet voice in the back of my mind warning that I was dancing too close to the edge. I ignored it. The laughter around me felt hollow, and the warmth of the alcohol dulled any shred of anxiety that might have kept me in check. After my 6th or 7th drink, I felt a strange rush in my head. My heart pounded in my ears, and for a split second, I felt like I was teetering between consciousness and a dream. The clock struck 11:48 p.m., and I remember staring at the display on my phone. That time stamp seared itself into my memory as if it had become a symbolic turning point. I tried to steady myself, but my body swayed. I felt a surge of panic, a realization that something was going horribly wrong. My fingers, clinging to the sides of the table, started to go numb. Voices around me blurred into a distant hum. Then, in a rush of sensations too overwhelming to name, everything went black. My last memory of that moment was a terrifying sense of emptiness, as if the world had dropped out from under me, leaving me in a dark void. I was out cold. The people around me thought I was just passing out from too many drinks, and maybe that's how it appeared, but my body felt like it had reached its breaking point. In that complete darkness, a strange calm began to settle over me. I've always struggled to describe it. It wasn't peaceful in the usual sense, but rather an absence of pain. A floating sensation took over. It felt like I was weightless, hovering in a place where time didn't exist, where nothing could harm me. It was as though I had cast off a heavy cloak I didn't even know I was wearing. It didn't feel like a dream or an hallucination. It felt real, more real than anything I'd ever known. Suddenly, I was confronted with a sight that defied everything I believed about life and consciousness. I saw myself, my physical body, limp on the floor, surrounded by people frantically trying to figure out what was happening. Someone pressed on my chest, Another person was on the phone, presumably calling for an ambulance. The scene was tinted with a kind of haze. The edges blurred, but the center was sharp enough for me to see the terror on their faces. I remember thinking, how can I be here, looking down at all of this, when I'm also there on the ground? It made no logical sense, but in that moment, the impossibility felt surprisingly natural. Hovering above the chaos, I noticed a warm golden light enveloping everything below me. It was as if someone had dimmed the rest of the world's colors and cast a soft glow around the people in the room. The contrast between the frantic movement and the calm I felt was startling. I wasn't afraid, exactly. There was confusion and a spike of adrenaline, but fear didn't grip me the way it would if I were conscious in my body. Something about that light felt inviting, like an unspoken promise that I was safe, even though I was clearly seeing my own body lying there without breath. That was when I sensed it, a presence. At first, I couldn't see anything other than the golden glow, but I felt it. Something or someone there with me. It radiated a warmth I can only describe as pure acceptance. No judgment, no anger, just a loving embrace that seemed to flow right through me. My thoughts were swirling, caught between wonder and disbelief. Then, within that aura, I caught the faintest sense of multiple presences, like figures standing just out of view. I couldn't define them in any familiar way, but they felt undeniably real. One voice, or maybe it was a feeling that formed into words, spoke clearly into my mind. You have been blinded by what you thought was relieving your pain, but it has only deepened your struggle. The statement hit me like a wave. Alcohol, my supposed escape, had become an anchor. I'd known it on some level, but hearing it in this realm, from a presence that felt all-knowing yet gentle, was shattering. All those drinks, all those nights I believed I was coping, had been weaving a web of self-destruction around me. Amid this awakening, I noticed that the black void I'd been floating in was thinning, giving way to a kind of luminous space that stretched on infinitely. The golden light intensified, and I felt weightless, almost euphoric. I wanted to stay there. For the first time in years, I didn't feel shame or guilt or any desire to numb myself. It was freedom, a relief from the burdens I'd carried for so long. Then, the presence shifted, and I felt a rush of images pour through me. I saw my life, my past, like a film reel playing at high speed. There were moments of genuine happiness, birthdays with friends, the first time I fell in love, simple times with my family. Then, interspersed with those glimpses of joy, came scenes of heartbreak and chaos fueled by my addiction. I saw how many gatherings ended in tears or apologies I never fully remembered making. In one scene, I was lashing out at a close friend, eyes clouded by anger that had no real source. Another image showed me missing an important family event because I was too hungover to get out of bed. It hurt to watch, but the images felt different here. They were stripped of rationalizations and excuses. Instead, I saw them for what they truly were: choices, each one paving the path that led me to this very moment. As the images continued, they grew darker. I witnessed the hurt in my loved one's eyes, disappointment, concern, and sometimes resentment. It was painful, but no one was punishing me. It felt more like I was finally able to see the ripple effects of my behavior, something I'd been too stubborn or numbed to acknowledge. Then, the presence or voice, whatever it was, gently pressed another realization into my heart. The consequences of my addiction weren't just physical or emotional. They were spiritual. I saw how the energy of each drink weighed on me, chaining me to a cycle of self-denial and isolation. In those moments, it became clear that alcohol had not only kept me from facing my problems, it had also robbed me of exploring my potential. How many times had I buried my creativity under a fog of beer? How many raw emotions had I drowned before giving them a chance to guide me toward meaningful change? And the scariest part, how often did I choose a bottle instead of a genuine connection with another person? Alcohol had woven its way into my spirit, entwining with my fears and my insecurities, creating a false promise of relief that only led me further from the real solution. All of this insight came to me without any condemnation, but it carried the weight of truth. I felt raw, standing there, if standing is even the right word when you're essentially bodiless. The presence around me communicated that I wasn't being shown these things to be shamed, I was being shown them so I could choose differently if I got the chance. There was a sense of urgent compassion, like a clear call to wake up and reclaim my life. Then, another wave of clarity hit. I saw potential futures stretching out in front of me, as though time itself were a vast, branching corridor. Some paths led to a continuation of my addiction, and I felt the sorrow that would follow me if I took that route. Other branches hinted at a life of sobriety, healing, and authentic connections. The voice or presence seemed to say, "There is more for you than what you have chosen. Do you wish to keep carrying the chains, or do you wish to be free?" It wasn't an ultimatum, but it felt like a powerful invitation. I was overwhelmed. Tears, though not physical tears, flowed through me. I wanted that freedom. I wanted another chance. Suddenly, the warmth brightened, or maybe my awareness of it deepened, and I felt a surge of energy pulling me away from that space. A panic rose in me like I was losing something precious. But at the same time, I understood that I wasn't meant to linger there indefinitely. A deep sense of acceptance welled up inside me. The revelation had been given, and now I had to decide how I would carry it forward. There was a jolt, like being yanked down from a great height. Everything around me, the golden light, the calm presence, rushed away. My eyes flew open, and the first thing I saw was the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. My chest felt tight, and a beeping sound pierced my ears. I was in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines that tracked my vital signs. My entire body trembled with weakness, and my mouth felt dry as if all the moisture had been sucked out of it. Fear surged through me, but along with it came a strange sense of determination. I had survived. In that moment, I knew it wasn't random luck. I'd been granted an opportunity to make things right. A doctor was standing beside me, relief plain on his face. I was told I'd overdosed on alcohol, that my body had essentially started shutting down. My heart rate had gone dangerously low, and if I'd been found a few minutes later, I might not be having that conversation. Something about hearing those words confirmed what I'd experienced. The near-death event wasn't just a blur or a dream. It was real in a way my daily life had never been. Lying there in the hospital, exhaustion pressing in on me, I felt a quiet resolve forming. I didn't want to go back to the destructive patterns that had led me to that bed. All the revelations I'd received still burned in my heart. I remembered the presence, the voice, the unconditional acceptance, and the urgent message that I needed to change. My mind replayed the images of the people I'd hurt, the broken pieces of my life that I had tried so hard not to see. It was time to face them and to heal. That first day of sobriety was a mixture of gratitude and terror. Gratitude because I was alive, because I had another shot at living differently. Terror because I wasn't sure who I was without alcohol. It had been such a crutch for my anxiety and insecurities. The idea of confronting my problems head-on felt like an uphill battle. But if those moments in that luminous space had taught me anything, it was that I'd been putting off living in truth for far too long. Over the next few weeks, I wrestled with withdrawal symptoms and emotional turbulence. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake, my mind replaying old memories, dredging up regrets and shame. Yet something inside me had changed. Whenever I felt close to sinking back into despair, I'd recall that golden light, that gentle voice telling me I was more than my bad choices. And with every memory of that warmth, I'd find the strength to keep going. Friends and family visited me, and I forced myself to be honest about what I'd been through. Some were supportive, some were skeptical, but I realized that I couldn't control how they reacted. All I could do was speak my truth. I shared that I felt like I'd been given a second chance, that I'd had a profound experience I couldn't fully explain, and that I was done lying to myself about the effects of alcohol on my life. Even though I worried people might think I was making excuses or sounding too dramatic, I spoke from the heart. In many ways, those raw conversations were my first steps toward healing the wounds I'd inflicted upon others and upon myself. Rebuilding my life was messy. I found a local support group and discovered that I wasn't alone in my journey. There were countless stories of people who had flirted with death, each emerging with a different perspective, but united by a sense of being somehow changed. Hearing their testimonies helped me piece together my own. Though my near-death experience had its own unique texture, the emotional threads of shame, regret, hope, and resolve were familiar to them. We shared tears, exchanged stories, and offered each other a space free of judgment. As my body recovered, I felt a newfound awareness of each moment. It was as if I had been half asleep for years, and now I was awakening to a world that seemed brighter and more fragile. Even the most mundane tasks, doing the dishes, taking a walk, listening to the wind, carried a sense of wonder. I realized that my relationship with alcohol had stifled my ability to appreciate the small joys of being alive. Now, I wanted to absorb every sight, sound, and sensation as though it might be my last. That hunger for real, unfiltered experience replaced the old thirst for a drink. Still, not every day was filled with epiphanies. Some days I woke up craving the numbness, hating the way my thoughts bounced off the walls of my mind like ping-pong balls. But I held on to the memory of that out-of-body moment, seeing myself on the floor, feeling that loving presence. And I reminded myself that I never wanted to waste the opportunity I'd been given. Each morning, I'd reflect for a moment, remembering how close I'd come to losing my life. That memory steadied me. It also humbled me. In time, I began to see transformations in my relationships. Friends who'd kept their distance before started to feel safer around me. We had open, sometimes painful, conversations about how my drinking had impacted them. Where once I might have become defensive or tried to brush it off, I now listened. I acknowledged their hurt. I apologized without making excuses. This process of repairing broken bonds wasn't quick or magical, but each honest conversation felt like an act of liberation, as if the weight I'd been carrying got a little lighter each time. The deeper spiritual consequences of alcohol, which had been hinted at in my near-death experience, continued to unfold in my reflections. I saw how each drink had dulled more than my senses. It had dulled my capacity for self-awareness and compassion. Alcohol had allowed me to avoid my own fears, but it also numbed my ability to feel real connection or to cultivate the empathy I needed for meaningful relationships. It was as though I had been wandering in a half-lit maze, constantly turning corners to escape the shadows, never realizing that the exit was in confronting them directly. I still can't fully articulate the presence I encountered in that golden light. Was it a manifestation of my higher consciousness? An angelic guide? A reflection of the divine? A reflection of the divine? I don't claim to have the answer, and maybe that's okay. The truth is, whatever it was felt like a loving wake-up call, a chance to see my life from a vantage point untainted by denial or shame. I carry that memory with me as a gentle reminder that there's more to existence than we perceive in our daily routines. We are more than our addictions, our pain, or the labels we slap on ourselves. Months passed, and I slowly started to appreciate the magnitude of my second chance. The hospital visits decreased. I started forming new habits, like journaling in the mornings and walking in nature instead of hanging out in bars. I learned to sit with my discomfort instead of drowning it. If I felt anxious or upset, I tried to trace the feeling to its root. Sometimes I reached out to friends or family to talk. Sometimes I prayed or meditated, and each time I did, I felt as though I was continuing the work that my near-death experience had set in motion. I also began volunteering at a local shelter, hoping to give back in some way. I'll never forget the day I met a young woman there who was visibly trembling, her eyes red and anxious. She told me she had just come off a 2-day bender, and she felt lost. We sat on a bench together, the cool afternoon air swirling around us, and she poured out her fears. It was so easy to see my old self in her shaking hands and urgent eyes. I shared a bit of my story, not to preach or give advice, but just to let her know that she wasn't alone. In that moment, I realized how powerful it can be to simply bear witness to someone else's struggles. Sometimes, seeing our reflection in another person's journey can be the nudge we need to keep going. Yet, even as I embraced these changes, the specter of alcohol never vanished entirely. There were days when stress or sadness whispered the old lie, just one drink might help. But then I remembered the void I fell into, remembered the brilliance of that other realm and the unconditional love I felt there. I recalled the figure of myself on the ground, pale and unresponsive, and how close I came to leaving everything behind. The memory of that moment was a powerful deterrent, a personal truth about where another drink could lead me. Eventually, I found it was crucial for me to seek professional help as well. Therapy sessions opened my eyes to underlying issues I'd never addressed. self-esteem problems, unresolved grief, and a fear of failure that I had tried to silence with alcohol. With each session, I felt as though I was rejoining the fragmented parts of myself, learning to accept the flaws and vulnerabilities that make me human. I began to see that my addiction was more than a physical or psychological dependency. It had been a spiritual crisis, too. I had lost the sense of meaning that keeps a person anchored in life, and I had tried to fill that void with a substance that only led me further from any real sense of purpose. That realization brought me back to the hospital bed, the beep of the monitors, and the doctor's relieved face. It brought me back to the golden light and the silent, loving presence that showed me the truth about my existence. What if I hadn't returned? What if I had slipped away for good that night, never seeing the broken trail I left behind, or the hope that was just within reach? The idea still shakes me. Now, I don't claim to have all the answers about life or death. I only know that my near-death experience peeled back a curtain for me, revealing a bigger picture and reminding me that every choice has a ripple effect on our souls. It's not about living in constant fear of messing up again. It's about recognizing that each of us has the power to choose differently at any moment. And in my case, stepping away from alcohol isn't just a health decision. It's a daily commitment to living the truth I encountered in that realm. It's a promise to honor the second chance I was given. As I stand here today, I speak to you not as someone who's figured it all out, but as someone who has been to the brink and come back with scars and lessons. If there's anything I can share from all of this, it's that our chains often disguise themselves as comfort. The bottles we reach for, the habits we cling to, the illusions we maintain, they can feel safe, yet each one holds us captive in ways we often fail to notice until it's almost too late. My hope is that by sharing what I experienced on that night, you might pause and consider the chains in your own life. I won't lie and say it's been easy. Sobriety has been one of the toughest roads I've ever walked. There are days when my hands still tremble with the urge to numb out. Days when the shame of past mistakes tries to creep back in. But then I remember the truth I saw so vividly. Every single moment carries the potential for renewal. That knowledge pulls me forward. It reminds me that no matter how grim a situation might look, or how entrenched we are in our habits, we can still make different choices. We can break free from what holds us down. If my story resonates with you, let it be a gentle reminder. You are not defined by your struggles. Whatever chains you carry, whether it's alcohol or something else, do not have to dictate your future. I'm living proof that it's possible to step away from the brink and find a kind of hope you never knew existed. The process isn't neat, it isn't fast, and it isn't painless, but it's real, and it's within reach. My near-death experience opened my eyes to the spiritual dimension of my choices. I can't hand you a neat lesson that wraps it all up with a bow. I can only share how it felt to be shown another perspective on my life, and be given a chance to change course. Perhaps that's the essence of it. We each have these crossroads, these points of decision where we can choose to keep numbing or step into the unknown with courage. And the unknown might be terrifying, but it could also be where real living begins. Waking up in that hospital bed was a shock that shattered my old consciousness. Fear and determination coursed through me in equal measure, but I clung to the clarity that said it was time to break free from the grip of alcohol. The memory of my out-of-body experience fueled that clarity, reminding me that life is fragile and that we have no guarantee of a second chance. Each new day since has felt like both a burden and a gift, a chance to stumble forward in the direction of a life that aligns with the deeper truth I glimpsed. I still reflect on that golden light and the presence that felt like pure, boundless love. I wish I could offer a precise explanation of what it was, but maybe mystery is part of its power. It stood in stark contrast to the darkness of my addiction, illuminating a path I never knew existed. And while I'm no expert in spirituality, I've come to believe that there is a dimension to our lives that far exceeds our usual awareness, a dimension where our intentions and actions echo in ways we don't fully comprehend. My experience showed me that those echoes can either bind us or set us free. Now, as I look around, standing firmly in my sobriety, I see how different life can be when you're not living under the constant haze of a substance. I see color in the world again, feel emotion in its full spectrum, painful moments included, but also joy so vivid they bring me to tears. I've learned that true comfort isn't found in a bottle. It's found in genuine connection, in facing reality head on, and in allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to heal. So I ask you, what holds you back? What illusions do you cling to, believing they protect you from pain when they might be the very things causing it? You might not be struggling with alcohol. It could be any number of things, but no matter what form our chains take, they all have a way of convincing us we can't live without them. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. You can live without them. More than that, you can thrive without them. If my story has touched you in any way, consider looking at your life through a different lens. Think about the relationships you might be jeopardizing, the passions you're burying, or the dreams you're deferring. The truth is, we never know when our last moment might come. One second, we're laughing at a party, and the next we're floating above our own bodies, wondering if this is the end. It's a wake-up call nobody expects and nobody wants, but it can be a catalyst for profound change if we pay attention. I'm not here to preach or to claim that my path is the only one. My hope is simply that by sharing what I experienced, you'll feel inspired to examine your own life. Because once you peel back the layers of denial, once you break free from the illusions, a different kind of peace can emerge, one rooted in authentic living and honest self-awareness. And that kind of peace, I've come to learn, is worth infinitely more than any temporary buzz a drink can offer. In the end, I believe we all stand at the threshold of awakening, one breath away from realizing there's more to life than our struggles and vices. For me, it took nearly dying to grasp that. I'm grateful I woke up in time to make different choices. If you're hearing this and you sense a stirring in your own heart, then maybe this is your moment to reflect on what's keeping you chained. It might feel frightening, but on the other side of that fear is the possibility of becoming who you were always meant to be. Thank you for letting me share my personal journey. I don't pretend it's over. In many ways, it's just beginning. Every day brings a new challenge, a new test of my commitment, but it also brings hope. And that hope is built on the foundation of one simple truth. I survived, and in surviving, I discovered that genuine freedom lies in facing yourself, every vulnerability, every regret, and deciding you won't be defined by them anymore. So, if you take anything from my story, let it be this. No matter how dark it gets, there is a light waiting for you to choose it. And that choice, my friend, can change everything.